All right, flowery friends, welcome back to the page. I feel very official this week after obtaining a couple mini microphones here. And to celebrate, we are going to take a little walking tour of the flower field itself. We're going to start where I'm standing now. And if you've watched any of my previous videos where I was building out no-till flower beds, moving a bunch of mulch, and hauling a bunch of dirt, the new part of the flower field is what I was building there, and that's where we're standing right now. So everything from the house line forward is new this season, and everything is finally tucked into its bed and setting roots for a busy summer ahead. The row that I'm actually standing in currently is flanked with sweet peas. So I have hundreds and hundreds of really beautiful sweet pea varieties on both sides of me. And I planted them out in an ombre pattern. So it's going to go from blues to purples to pinks. And then way down on that back end is a really beautiful creamy white that I hope to use in a lot of wedding work this year. Now at the base of the sweet peas, I did not start enough, so lesson learned for next year, but are a bunch of beautiful pansy varieties. These are not your average pansies. They come in soft shades of lavender, salmon, peach, champagne tones, and I'm training them to grow up to 12 to 18 inches tall to be used in bouquets. On this farther side where we get a little bit more sun, I'm also planting out some basil. We've had a very long, cold spring here, so the basil actually just got out this week, and I still have a couple successions to plant out. So more on that to come, possibly in another garden tour later this year. But for now, let's move past the sweet peas and I'll take you through what's planted over here. So I have moved just a little bit deeper into that new portion of the flower field. If you're trying to orient yourself, the sweet peas that I was standing in are over here, and my house is over on that side. In this portion of the flower field, I have a ton of annuals planted out. So I have amaranth at my feet here on both sides, pincushion, marigolds, cosmos, snapdragons, and one row of dahlias behind this rabbit fencing here. I don't spray any sorts of harmful pesticides or herbicides here on the flower farm, and instead use physical obstacles to keep the rabbits away from the plants that they love. The dahlias are one they go after, so that's why there is some rabbit fencing there. Other things that you'll notice out here are these hoops. So I use these hoops for a number of reasons. They're excellent early in spring to drape things like frost cloth over, or when there are incredibly intense high temperatures, you could drape something like shade cloth over it or insect cloth over it. I use these primarily during the summer season to hold up my support netting. I net almost every single type of flower out here on the flower farm to encourage long, tall stems and to protect them from the intense winds we get off Lake Michigan. And this is a nice way to support that netting. You could use something like T-posts, but I find these are a lot safer to work around. When I'm bending over to harvest something out of the bed, I'm not at risk of poking myself with something like a T-post in the face. What else is out here? Irrigation. Let me walk back one row and just show you guys the irrigation system I've set up in this part of the garden. In my other parts of the flower field, I use drip irrigation. So I'll show you that in a little bit, but they're lines that are lined up in every single row, and they just drip, drip, drip out water right at the level of the roots. I've seen a couple other flower farmers use this wobbler system that I have set up here, and they've raved about it, so I figured I would try it in this part of the field. This is just a simple piece of tubing with a wobbler sprinkler on top, and I have them spaced about every 12 feet out here in the new flower field, and they're hooked up with a larger irrigation line that just taps into the house spigot on the side of my house. When I turn these on, they all start wobbling, and it's more of a rain effect, so there will be water getting on some of the petals throughout the season, but I'm going to be very active about watering at night, letting them cool down and letting that moisture drip off overnight. That way I'm not burning out any petals with water drops throughout the season. The one other thing that you may notice back here is my new pickup stand. It is a work in progress. We still have to put up the siding and the roofing, so I'll be sharing more of that in another video, hopefully sometime soon, so you guys can see all the inner workings of that. Let's dive into the older portion of the flower field so I can show you what's growing over there. So this section of the flower field does not look like much right now. This is actually the peony patch, and you can see I've left a couple bloom heads on the plants just to make sure I was getting the flowers that I ordered. Peonies need about 2 to 3 years to get really established, set their roots, and start pumping out blooms. So this year and next year I won't really be harvesting from these plants as they're just maturing in the flower field. I may cut a small stem here or there, like this one that's already blown open in the heat today, to enjoy for myself, but it won't be until about 2026, 2027 that I start harvesting these for sale. Just behind me is where all of the daffodils were planted out earlier this spring. It is a little overridden with grass seed and weed seed right now. So I'm waiting for the daffodil foliage to die back completely, meaning that the bulbs are fully charged and ready for next season. And then I will be tarping that area out just to kill out all of the weeds and set them up for a successful spring next year. We're gonna dive on the other side of this patch over here to look at the old portion of the flower field and all of the beautiful annual seedlings over there. So this is a really nice spot to orient you to everything we've seen so far. On this side of me is that new flower field with the amaranth and the sweet peas and the pickup stand. Back there, behind those tall grasses, is the peony patch. And then all of this over here is where I've grown for the past few seasons. On the slope here, I have a bunch of dahlia plants, and I really purposely planted these here because it gets the best drainage on the property. Dahlias are really sensitive to too much moisture, and so far they're loving this spot. I have some really big dinner plate varieties like Labyrinth and Cafe au Lait, as well as some more antique looking varieties that are a little bit smaller. Let's dive into the field and I'll talk you through some of the things that are planted out over here. Now, hopefully I don't make you car sick by walking you through this way, but I think it's a nice way to see what's planted in the old field. These first two beds are Lisianthus, which are just so beautiful when they're fully opened, followed by a couple beds of zinnias. I'll be showing you the drip irrigation over here in just a minute, but these are all flowers that need to be harvested when the flower heads themselves are fully opened. So I'm using that drip irrigation over here to prevent the petals from getting burned by the water throughout the day. We passed more beds of Lisianthus and zinnias, and this bed is filled with feverfew that is just about ready to burst. A bed of yarrow that I just planted out this season. And then lastly, last year's yarrow, which is already starting to flower. You can really see the difference here between 1 year. So this bed is last year, and this bed is this year. So here's the drip irrigation I was telling you about. This is a dahlia bed, so I just have 2 rows of plants and just 2 lines of drip tape. About every 8 inches, there's a little slit in the tape, and you can see it's just drip, drip, dripping right in line with the row of plants. The dahlia beds only have 2 rows because there's only 2 rows of plants, whereas something like Lisianthus or zinnias may have up to 4 lines of drip tape. Just beyond the yarrow in this part of the flower field are all of the bearded iris beds. So these guys have fully wrapped up for the season. Some plants were incredibly successful this year, giving me up to 50 stems per 8 rhizomes, and all of these are second-year plants. A couple a little further back, I think they got too much water, so I'm going to be lifting those varieties into a new bed where there's hopefully some better drainage to get more productivity out of them next summer. So earlier on in the season, I showed you guys how to prune these hydrangeas, and you can see they've put on just a ton of dense green foliage since. They're starting to bud up. They're really just getting going for the season, and I can't wait to see them towards the end of July or earlier in August when they're pumping out blooms. Just in front of all of these hydrangeas, I planted out a series of lavender called Phenomenal. Phenomenal lavender does really well with colder, more extreme climates, so it should be able to withstand the cold, harsh winters here in Wisconsin. And I'm hoping I can use the blooms for all sorts of cooking, whether it's lavender-infused syrups or over top of things like mussels during the hot summer months. Now this is a really special part of our property. It's towards the back end of our property where we have a bluff and a ravine, and there are just about a dozen or so crazy tall and old pine trees back here. They cast quite a shadow, and I've worked this season to start establishing a shade garden. It doesn't look like much right now because everything I planted was a bare root, but I planted out about 100 hellebores, different varieties of astilbe, and other shade-loving perennials. We'll come back to this one probably next year in spring when it's going to be looking great, or at least I hope so. Now this is the last little bit of the flower field, and you may recognize this area from my willow video earlier in the season. We're on the very back end of all of the flower field across from this drainage ditch. Ignore the drainage ditch. I need to weed it, but it is quite a task, so I'm dragging my feet on it this spring. But around me are the willow rods that I planted out, as well as some bare root smoke bush that a flowery friend passed along to me. The willow is getting leafy and green, and it's sending up a bunch of new shoots. I don't think I'll necessarily harvest rods from it this year, but we're going to be set up to start harvesting rods and establishing our willow fence next season. I hope you all enjoyed following me around the flower field today. I'm hoping to find better and better ways to share the flower field with you all as I get more familiar with this microphone and with that camera and figuring out fun ways to show you updates around here. Things will start to be in flower soon, so there will definitely be more updates like this in the future, and I'm going to get back to my regular schedule of posting every other Friday, so I will see you guys in just a couple weeks.